Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to Patreon Supporter Spotlight number 46. I've got 3 tanks replays for you today, so this is not going to be quite as long as if I had a warships one on the end as well, but I just felt like doing tanks only today, and also some British battleships may have slightly appeared in my port and warships, and obviously a longer video means less time spent playing with those, so there's maybe that slight reason in there as well. So there's a couple of things going on in all 3 replays today. They're all going to be very good damage, and there's a nice progression as well. So we're starting off with tier 8, we've got tier 9 and a tier 10, although I'm not going to do it quite in that order for reasons that hopefully you'll see. But this is Youu. We're starting off in the tier 8, and this time it's the TVP, which is a pretty nice medium tank. As you can see, it's Himmelsdorf, it's pretty good matchmaking, a couple of tier 9s on each side, but not an overwhelming number, and if Youu plays his cards right and works with his teammates, he can be rather effective. As you can see, the enemy T-54 just rushed all the way up here and has been completely outnumbered. So although he's done a bit of damage to that IS, in fact, I think he's managed to kill that IS, he's about to die himself. So they've got the hill, that's all well and good. I mean, there's that Super Pershing there, but it seems like that's the only remaining enemy tank. However, elsewhere it's not looking so rosy. They've lost 5 tanks already, and as you can see, there's a big enemy push up the 7-8 line. So those tanks in the northwest quadrant are a bit stuffed. They look like they're going to be rather surrounded. Basically, the sooner they can clear out the Super Pershing and get back down there and help, the better. So the 1390 makes a move. This is the tier 8 1390. This is a 915 replay, so it's before that change was made. And that Super Pershing just, I don't know, got a bit hammered there. I think he was so focused on Youu that he didn't quite register when the Super Pershing made a move, and then the Super Pershing was able to do quite well out of it. Not well enough to actually kill him, but yeah, this is, you know, looking like they can get this guy quite easily. There we go. Shot to the commander's hatch, the old classic weak spot that one tries to go for. Now during that, unfortunately, Youu took a shot in the back from the T-43 somehow, who is all the way down in G3, and also there was the unwelcome discovery of the T-10 being there. So he's had to use his repair kit, and he's been reduced to a 1-shot. Frankly, I think trying to pop out to trade with the T-10 there was a bit of a mistake, because the armour on the T-10 isn't superb, at least not compared to the other tier 9 Soviet heavy tank, the SD-1 of course, but good enough to resist this gun given the angle, and it's not like you could really afford to take the hit. So this guy's sitting there on full health, and none of these tanks up here are particularly healthy, apart from the Type 62, who doesn't really seem to be paying attention to this right now. So it's up to these 3 damaged tanks. So the Emil takes the hit, the 1390 goes in to try and get round again, but the T-10 takes him out unfortunately, but that does give the Emil enough of a window to actually get the killing blow. So that's all good. They've taken out the T-10, and that was a nice bit of teamwork, even if it meant one of them having to take the hit and get killed to actually do it. Unfortunately, the MEL-2 then gets killed by artillery, and now they're down to just 3 tanks with double the number of enemy tanks left alive. All's not done yet though. Now that looked awfully like a ram. Obviously the 1390 came off rather worse there. Possibly wasn't even loaded yet. I'm not even quite sure why they came around the corner that aggressively, if so, but maybe they just weren't expecting a Type 62 in the face. And with the SP-1C being a 1-shot, well, that evens the odds rather nicely. Of the enemy tanks remaining, this IS-6 is by far the healthiest, but he's completely ignoring Youu, so that gives him a nice chance to get some shots in the rear, but it is only 2. However, that only 2 is still enough to take off, what was that, like a third of the hit points of that IS-3A, so yeah. Now the IS-6 has unfortunately died as well, but he did quite a bit of damage before he went down. He was the last surviving tank of all the tanks that were down here. So you'll see that they actually managed to do rather well for himself. That shot there was pretty nicely calculated as well. You don't see, like, people using the windows is ordinarily not an uncommon sight, but using that little gap there, so it's not something you see very often. So I wondered initially why the T-43 popped out when he knew that Youu was there, but I guess just because the Type 62 was chasing up behind them, they felt like they had no choice, perhaps. And so we've gone from 2-to-1 odds to now 2-to-1 the other way, because they outnumber this IS-3A. And if they work together, they can do this. Now, Youu takes the slightly risky decision of going round through the cap, and granted, if the IS-3A was going for their own cap, that would have been good to know, but if he'd run face first into the IS-3A in a bad position, then he could have just been one shot. He would have just been one shot unless the IS-3A got very unlucky. In fact, I don't think the IS-3A could get unlucky enough not to one-shot Youu when he's only got 291 health left. But as it is, I mean, the Type 62 capping means that the IS-3A has to go back if he wants to have an even slim chance of winning this, except he really doesn't have a chance. The Type 62 can take the hit, and because the IS-3A is so intent on getting back, I mean, that just gives Youu the perfect opportunity to shave off more of his health. So when it came down to this 2 versus 1 situation, at that point it was sort of inevitable, given that it's a heavy tank versus 2 much more mobile tanks. Anyway, so no Top Gun for the Type 62, but he will still have done very well for himself. Youu did also very well for themselves, with 3,951 damage done, which is not half bad. It's definitely not half bad. As you can see, there was the Type at the top of the team. They must have had a bunch of spotting damage as well, and assistance to get a good 500 base XP clear. The IS-6 and the Himmelsdorf also did pretty well for themselves, but they also had 5 people that did absolutely nothing. So that was one of those team lists where it's very heavily weighted towards the top of the team in terms of how much the individual players actually did. So next we have our tier 10 game, and I've put it this way round rather than having a nice orderly progression. Well, firstly, just to annoy the people that would annoy, obviously. I mean, that's the most important reason. But also, I think the game that follows this one is going to be more exciting. Not to say that this isn't a good game, but I'm not sure exciting is going to be the right word. However, it is Sebidi's first match in the 268. And so, considering it's his very first match in it, it's going to be a pretty decent result. So it's Prokhorovka, which is potentially quite a good map if you've got a team that's spotting for you. There aren't any light tanks, however, so Sebidi might end up having to do some of his own spotting here. The base view range on this, I actually looked this up, is 370 meters, and he is running the combat rations. Possibly he has optics, possibly he has crew skills that improve vision, maybe brothers in arms. If you've completely maxed out everything and you've got optics as well, then you can get up to something like 450 meters view range. But I don't have any way of knowing exactly what his view range is, only that potentially he can spot for himself. The 268 itself, otherwise, I mean, it's kind of like the tanks before it. It's got pretty good mobility in a straight line. I think it traverses better than the 704. I mean, bear in mind, I haven't played either the 704 or this thing, but yeah, generally speaking, you've got maybe a bit of armor to use, but you don't want to rely on it. It's not like this is a Jaegeru or even the Death Star, which actually has pretty decent armor for a tier 10 tank destroyer. Most of the tier 10 tank destroyers don't. And this thing, well, you know, if you're facing lower tiers, you maybe could rely on the armor, but if you get spotted, however, it's much more likely that that will happen. So that was the IS-3 and the IS-7 that hit him. But, you know, he's hit them equally as hard. He's up to 4,000 damage done already. The gun itself, I mean, I think it's the same damage. Yeah, it is. It's like 750, isn't it? It's the same damage as the previous 2 tiers, but you get a bit more penetration. It's not quite the same gun as the BL-10, and presumably some of the other stats are different as well. So just the AP alone, I think it's over 300 average pen, which is more than enough for most targets. He's also got 10 rounds of heat though, and 5 rounds of HE. If it was me, I'd probably be carrying a little more AP versus the heat and the HE, but as I say, I haven't played this. Maybe this is a really good mix of ammo. Anyway, so it doesn't look like the enemy team are particularly pushing up this side. The Batchat's moved up to spot a little bit. It also looks relatively static on the rest of the map as well, so Sebedy doesn't have to worry about being rushed from the other side. He's not going to have to try and rush back and defend. It looks like there's a pretty even spread of tanks across the map from both teams. So anyway, the Batchat has spotted a Conqueror down there. We know the 268's down there because that is what killed the T-54 Mod 1. So he's got to be careful about that. But otherwise, there's not a lot of movement down there. So it maybe tells us that apart from those 2 tanks, perhaps there isn't that much else. So that Batchat, when he was spotting previously, has taken a bit of a hit. He might be more cautious about going forwards again, but now he's going to try it. It might cost him dearly, but we shall see. Now, Sebedy at this point gets a bit distracted. I personally would have been pointing my gun still down the 2 line because, yeah, even, you know, a second or 2 spent traversing the tank can matter. In this case, he does get it round enough, quick enough to actually hit that Conqueror. In fact, if he can get another hit, he's going to kill this guy. But that Batchat is in serious trouble at this point. So there we go, straight through the Conqueror's turret or hull or whatever. Yeah, against this gun, the Conqueror's armor's not bad these days, but against this gun, good luck. So, it seems like most of what's on this flank is dealt with, and from this position he's actually got enough elevation that he can fire all the way across to the 6th line, but of course they can also fire across at him. So there's the 268, gets spotted, and as he's spotted, pulls back. Bit of a hasty shot there that might have hit, and kind of jerked the reticle at the last second, and I think that cost him the pen, unfortunately. They've also lost the E75 to the Emil-2, who's moved over to take an interest in this position. Not good news, because although he's got a fair chunk of health left, you don't particularly want to sit in front of an autoloader. But with this gun, he can punish that Emil just as hard. So he's spotting for himself at this point. And unfortunately that seems like it, I don't know, was a tracking shot or a bounce. I think it must have been a bounce, unless it was a tracking shot and the guy just repaired really quickly. But with the rate of fire, he's going to get another hit in, and because he's double bushed at the moment, he should be fine. However, having moved forward a bit, this is getting a bit close. He doesn't really have any backup other than artillery, and although he's behind a bush, he gets spotted. Oh, that was a bit hairy, but it's fine. The other guy misses because it was a snapshot, and then artillery finishes the 268 off, very fortunately. So that was a bit hairy. He could have survived the hit, but it would have left him on not a lot of health. They're still even, however, despite having secured this flank. Sebedy hasn't really moved from this position that much. I mean, he's done a bit of driving around, but this is why I said it's maybe not that exciting of a match. In terms of damage, though, over 8,000 done. Even if it ended right here, this would be a really damn good first outing. But we're not quite done yet. So that was a very good hit across the way into the IS-7. Weakened it enough for the Centurion 7-1 to take the kill. Gets spotted by the Emil-2, which could have been bad, but fortunately gets off the return shot. So although he took 1 from the Emil, he was able to get the kill in return, so that was actually a really good trade. He also got his one and only bounce, I think that was, for this game. So, yeah, the armor worked there once, but everything else that's hit him has penned, so it's not like you can afford to sit out in the open and take the hits. But at this stage, they've very firmly won this. There's only a couple of tanks left. There's the IS-3 and artillery, so they've basically been able to hold their ground long enough and chip away at the enemy team enough to gain that decisive advantage. So the final kill on artillery, always satisfying. He's not in position to get the IS-3 as well, not that it would have given him a top gun or anything, but a little more damage would have been nice. However, considering, as I said, very first game, 9,407 damage done and an ace tanker. So that was a pretty good performance. But because he was hitting so much of that from range, even with that amount of damage done, he still wasn't first place. He nearly was, it wasn't far off, but it was actually the Centurion 7-1 who presumably picked up a pretty good chunk of spotting damage and maybe even a good chunk of the damage for what Sebedy was doing himself, because, you know, high tier medium tank probably has a good view range. And talking of high tier medium tanks, we come on to our final replay. This is You Got Beat by a Girl in the tier 9 AMX 30. And as you can hear, she has a female crew on this thing. There's actually now female crew voices, of course, for all the different national lines. But for some reason, I mean, they toned it down. You don't get that same horrible, weird radio quality that you did when they first introduced them, but it's still, like, I don't know why it just doesn't sound the same as the male crew voices, why they had to add an extra different effect. I don't know. So this one isn't going to be as impressive in pure damage, but there's going to be a bit more action going on, and there's also going to be a fair bit of spotting damage in this one as well, even though there are this time round light tanks. And again, it's a good map for that, potentially. So, a tier 10 game, only a couple of tier 10s per side. I think this is a 3-5-7 matchup. It looks like it is. And, well, the enemy team are already pressing across the field. They have a fair number of their own tanks there, and they've actually got a couple of tanks that have gone to the hill. But You Got Beat hasn't committed either way. She's at this position alongside the HWK-12, and it allows her to pick up spotting and damage on things that are trying to cross the middle of the field, like this Type 5 Heavy. Why would you do that, Type 5 Heavy? Why would you do that? I don't know. I don't know. There's something very stereotypical about this. Just the fact that it would happen to be a Type 5 Heavy driver. It says something, probably. So as he's angled a bit relative to her tank, she's loaded some heat just to punch through the turret, but this guy's screwed anyway, because why would you do that? Why would you just drive out in the middle of the field? It wasn't like he was passing to the south to try and put some pressure on, as those other tanks did. No, it was literally just blundering out into the middle of the open. You wouldn't do that in a Mouse, you wouldn't do that in an E100, so why would you try that in a Type 5? I don't know. So she's got the chance of a shot at the Skoda, and, well, obviously that was going to get her spotted. They know she's here at this point. This is a bit risky firing from this position and getting spotted, especially when there is artillery. But I don't think artillery ever really fires at her in this game, so she gets a bit lucky in that regard. But I think she's more relying on teammates to shoot these people and to pick up some of the spotting. And she's already got a decent amount of spotting, in fact. I think some of it was from the Type 5, but not just that. So then another contender appears, the VKB, also pressed across, and I think they must have pressed round from the south and then come along that side of that row of buildings to only get spotted at that point. I don't think they drove across the open like the Type 5 did, but even so, they are now very much in a position to just get nuked, so they did. And oh look, another contender, another Japanese heavy tank driving into the middle of the open. Yeah, there's all of the Japanese heavy tank driver stereotypes going on in this game, isn't there? That's just ridiculous. Why would you do that? Was the fate of the Type 5 Heavy not enough of a clue? This time she refrains from firing herself, because if she does, the Patton KR and the medium tanks opposite will definitely pick her up, so she's just relying on her teammates and picking up some nice spotting damage at this point. She does, however, hold fire at this point against the 121, and I would have taken that shot myself. I'd have taken that shot and fallen back, because the T-34 and the CDC are in trouble. In fact, the 121's just killed the T-34, and the T-57 was obviously on their reload. So although the T-57 did actually manage to get the 121, I think I'd have tried for the shot anyway. If nothing else, it might have made the 121 fall back, might have saved the T-34, but that's all just speculation. You can never know for sure. Anyway, the 121 is dead for now. They don't have anything immediately threatening the cap anymore. There's also been a bit of action going on up at the crest of the hill, and it turns out the Stridswagen is up there as well, which is interesting. It means they're not just camping further back. So half of each team is dead. We know roughly where everybody is at this point, although some of the mediums have been moving around. Pershing is trying for the hill, and at this point Youu decides to a different Youu. It's very confusing. I've got Youu, and also you got beat by a girl in the same... Yeah, that was poor planning on my part. Yes. Anyway, it's going to be a good game though. It'll be worth it. So, yeah, she's moved up, and she's got this this mid-ridge bit to work with. The AMX-30's got pretty good gun depression, and I think the turret armor's not too bad, but I'm not sure you'd necessarily want to rely on it. The T-57 decided to take the low path, but they've been now just caught in the open, so unfortunately, having been spotted, you know, there's no cover down there. If you've got the speed to make it, then it can be a good route to get up underneath the enemy tanks, but they were low enough health that they didn't quite get there. At this point, though, I mean, I think this is her one true mistake of the game, and she gets away with it, but she's just sat up here, and it really is luck that no one has shot at her, because we know the Rheinmetall is down by their base still. The Rheinmetall is what killed the 57 Heavy. The IS-3 is obviously outside of the vision range, or outside of... she's outside of their vision range is what I'm ham-fistedly trying to say. But there's no guarantee that the Centurion or the Skoda weren't also in a position to spot her at that point. So that was an unnecessary risk, a very unnecessary risk that could have gone very, very wrong, especially with a Rheinmetall Borsig in the mix. However, she did get away with it. She has managed to nobble that IS-3. The Centurion 7-1, as it turns out, had pushed across the south and gone to their base. The Skoda, meanwhile, had repositioned there, but in having fired at her, they've given their own position away, so they're now screwed. They've emptied their clip, and Youu actually gets the kill there. Unfortunately, the Centurion Action 10 gets then taken out by artillery, but once that Skoda revealed their position, they were a bit screwed, and Youu got beat, had the hit points to take the damage. So they're closing the net. It's the last couple of tanks. She actually got a big chunk of spotting on that Rheinmetall, even though they were temporarily unspotted. But yeah, there's not a lot left but the cleaning up at this point. So there's the Borsig gone. There's the Centurion gone. That's 7 kills now. However, the HWK, that's how I think of it anyway. Silly brain. Gets that final kill, so no Radley Walters, but that was a very, very, very good result indeed. So an ace mastery, patrol duty, or is that a scout medal? No, I think that's patrol duty, and collectively, combinedly, that's the word, over 10,000 damage and spotting damage, which was more than enough to put her at the top of the team. So that was it 4,600 damage done, 5,404 spotting, so that was not half bad. That was not half bad, and with a result like that, I mean, she had the most damage done on the team anyway, but with all the spotting damage on top of that, over 1,500 base XP is quite impressive. that's not too shabby at all. So yeah, you can see why I had that one last, I hope. I'm not trying to knock Sebidi's game at all. That was a very impressive result for being the first match that he had in that tank. But inherently it's a tank destroyer game and whacking things from a distance for the most part. So, you know, there's always that element going on as well. It's just a little bit visually interesting, less visually interesting even. But yeah, no, this was a very good match as well. They were all good matches, you know. I picked them out for that reason. Anyway, enough rambling. Let's wrap this up. So, hopefully you have enjoyed this video, these replays. And if you have, you can hit the like button. You can leave any comments below. You can sub to my channel if you haven't already. And, as always, stay tuned for more.